Talks from a few people, and we're going to go in very different directions of different flavors of collaborative learning and federated learning. And I think in this talk, we're going to focus on cross-silo FL. So the prior talk was heavier on the cross-device FL. And I'm very excited we have Micah. I've met Micah on a panel many years ago. We hit it off. We're talking about DP and specifically, DP in the context of cross-silo, all the kinds of misunderstandings. So maybe you'll hit on some of the points here. But I'm really excited because, at least for someone who has not worked on cross-silo FL, I'd like to better understand the requirements, the constraints. Is it a privacy problem? It's a policy problem, governance. So, Micah, please tell us.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for having me. Good morning. And thank you, Dan, for that previous talk. That was extremely exciting. And so my name is Micah Scheller. I'm currently at Flower Labs as of this week. But I put up an introduction here because I'm guessing a lot of folks don't know me. And I bolded this piece just now because it might explain why I was so excited during Dan's talk. My background is Intel Labs. Up until the labs were shut down at the end of this year. I was there for 16 plus years doing security and privacy research, and so excited to see TEEs really starting to come into their own and get used in these kinds of systems. In terms of federated learning, I basically started on it when the great paper came out. At the time we were looking at adversarial machine learning, and we were interested in defenses against adversarial machine learning that leveraged TEEs, and federated learning seemed like a great use case for this. Not too surprisingly, I pretty quickly found out that studying federated learning attacks and defenses on synthetic use cases was pretty much worthless. And so we began looking for real world scenarios. And given Intel's customer base, we were pretty sure we were going to be looking for cross-silo. And the good news is I ran into a professor, I'll introduce him later, at UPenn, who needed help running a federated learning experiment across 71 hospitals. So we got our chance to study it in the wild and pretty quickly completely changed our focus from attacks and defenses onto governance and policy because it was quite clear that we were not going to get very many more experiments unless we did something about how hard it is to set these up and actually study them. So I'm going to talk some about that, what's hard about that. And while a lot of the problems I think are probably the responsibility of industry to address, there are some really good nuggets that I think academia might be exactly the right place to look at them. I like questions, ask anytime. You saw me biting my tongue trying not to ask, but I myself am perfectly happy to be asked questions during my presentation. Okay, so we've talked about this in some other talks, and it gets talked about a lot, that this cross-silo federation and on-device are fundamentally different. One thing I want to point out is actually the cross-silo case, and I'll make this case a little bit later, it's also fundamentally different from one another all the time. There are many, many flavors of this, and I would say this running joke about definitions of federated learning, I would add to the pile the number of customers interested in federated learning, because they all want to do different things in many cases. Another point I really want to make is that in a lot of the federated learning literature and research, we focus on the differences between these two based on the study that's gone into the on-device federated learning. We look at them in terms of convergence time, or we look at them in terms of communication cost. Maybe we look at them in terms of straggler handling. But the one that actually jumps out from my side of the fence is the trust. So Dan's team's done all this wonderful work to build trust with users. In my world, the trust model you're starting with before you do any of that great work is already very strong. The reality is, Google has my data. If I didn't trust Google to do federated learning, why do I have an Android phone? It's kind of crazy, right? So I applaud you guys for the work you do, because in many ways, I think you do it because you care. From our side of the world, you guys already have strong trust. In the cross-silo case, trust can vary widely. You can imagine the difference between trusting your service provider as a customer, and where your service provider already can watch all of your traffic, potentially, knows a lot about you, versus trusting your direct competitor with your company's secrets. Those are two very different things. So I wanted to make that point because I think, again, When this is often studied and these are often compared, the focus is on the problems that are interesting on the device side as opposed to the killer problem on the cross-silo, which is trust. So to get a bit into the various types, when I talk about the cross-silo cases can vary widely, I'll show a couple, including this medical federation. I call it canonical just because for some reason it does get used a lot. Dr. Spiridon Bacchus, who's now at Indiana, he's the guy I met. He had a lot of friends, has a lot of friends. He's very well liked, a lot of contacts in the medical research space, and he had 71 different hospitals, not part of the same partner networks, spread across the world that actually wanted to try this and work together. It's basically, I guess what I'm saying is this would never have even happened, this first instance, if we didn't have this incredibly popular man right here that everyone trusted who could actually kind of, vouch for and advocate, actually even in some sense serve as the governor for this whole federation. So we have a huge first mover problem in cross-silo federation, and if it hadn't been for his popularity and the number of collaborators that he'd lined up, this never ever would have happened. It was a wonderful experience. We did learn a lot. It took a lot. And I have here the task, which was tumor segmentation. The model was nothing special, and yet we did actually beat state of the art. It was actually even a crappy model. It was a ResUnet that was not at all the latest and greatest, but we did set new state of the art because we had all this diverse and wonderful data. But it was too hard. It took a lot out of us. I kind of say sometimes like it ran on the souls of grad students. And in order to do this again, to get the kind of data we need, it needs to be easier. And we've been working on that. I'll talk some more about that if I have time, on ways in which we can ease all of the organizational work that has to go in to make this happen. But the bottom line is the governance and organization effort, we need a platform for that helps reconcile policies. In this previous slide, I had to talk to all the IT departments and InfoSec departments directly myself to explain to them what my federated learning framework did. Right? This was bespoke software. I had to show them my RPC protocol and everything so that they could actually make some assessment. That was a lot. Okay, so if it's so hard, why did I leave Intel and join an FL startup like Flower? Well, here's another example. This one is also very, very hard. Might not even work, but there's a tremendous amount of money in it. In this scenario, we have two pharmaceutical companies. One pharmaceutical company has candidate molecules that they might want to take to clinical trial. I'm going to drop this for the time being. If you're familiar with the drug discovery process, basically, you're going to have a bunch of candidate molecules, you're going to do a bunch of chemical tests, and eventually you're going to have some fewer candidate molecules that you're going to take to trial. That process from run a bunch of chemical tests, now have some to take to trial, traditionally took 5 to 6 years. With foundation models, they've been able to actually short circuit most of that stage, reduce it to about 6 months, and that's billions of dollars of value for pharma companies. They're doing it on their own clinical trial data. And what they really want to be able to do is do it on everybody's in a federated manner. Pharmaceutical companies have a ton of this. So these models here, like AlphaFold, my understanding is are mostly built on public data. That may have changed by now, apologies if so, but at least at the time I was working with these folks, it hadn't. And the bulk of the clinical trial data actually is private because most of it is failure. So they have a ton of failure cases. And they don't publish it because they don't release a drug. What they want to be able to do is run the same analysis that they ran on their own trial data on all of their competitors' trial data. And they want to get a report. And so you've got here what kind of looks like a federated RAG. You've got two extremely valuable assets, though this one is far more valuable than that, actually. If this is proprietary, it's also a sensitive asset. This is very sensitive because it's what Pharma A is paying for, and their competitor Pharma B would love to have it themselves. And basically, you've got this, and by the way, there are lots of these actually, and you've got a tricky aggregation step here. But you've got potentially $1 billion of value. The trick is, will it actually work? How do we test it? How can we bootstrap this with some early experiments? Again, we run into governance and security policy issues that prevent us from actually moving forward. Yeah?
When you say these firm, of choice?
So the question is, why not go with an intermediary?
Yeah, why don't this Pharma A and Pharma B just hire someone to centralize everything, do it, and...
That's a great question. Okay, I apologize to the pharma world if I get this wrong. There are a couple things. First off, they are using intermediaries to even arrange this. A lot of nonprofit intermediaries are involved to try to get this to work. The second is, I'm lying a little bit, this doesn't live at the pharma company, they don't own it. They own access to it, it lives at the hospital. They can't move it if they want to. So they actually don't have that same kind of direct access to the ability to give it to anyone else. It's actually a CRO that kind of proxies the whole set of hospitals that has all that data on behalf of the pharma company. So it's a pretty tricky situation to move that at all. But it's a great question.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what kind of data is being shared here? Because a lot of it is IP, as far as I don't know much about pharma, but most of it would be IP of their own company.
Yeah. So again, I'm representing, friends here. I'm not no expert, but the candidate molecular data, there's a representation from, the shape of a molecule. You're looking for an antibody. It's almost like Legos. It's this crazy shape. And you want to know what in the body it's going to attach to. Will it attach to disease, or will it attach to something that's not, and will it kill something in your body you need and be toxic? And what they have over here is a whole lot of these molecules that have gone through trial, and a lot of things that have gone wrong. They have a bunch of metrics they use. Some are common and shared, some are internal only, which is another challenge, that they use to evaluate sort of toxicity, potential for precision medicine, potential for affinity. A lot of the time what they're looking for here actually is a drug not that cures everybody, but that cures a specific patient population, because that's a lot easier problem, more likely to happen. And so they have a molecule and they want the model to tell them, based on what we've observed with molecules that are similar, and so you can almost imagine it's doing some form of embedding here. What can we expect in terms of breaking down at room temperature, in terms of causing stomach aches, right? In terms of working for different patient populations. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. All right, so this trust model, as you can imagine, is a whole lot more wicked than is Google going to collude with itself and steal data it could steal from me in any number of ways if it wanted to, right? Okay, forward. There we go. So, okay, let me back up really quick because I didn't emphasize this enough. One of the problems is we don't know that this even works. It's still kind of miraculous that it works internally. There's still a lot to be understood. So they want to iterate and figure out, build some intuition on what will work and why. And so the trick here is we need to be iterating, right? We need to come up with some ideas to solve real problems. We need to run them, run those ideas, get the results. We need to learn what worked, what didn't. And we need to figure out what we need to optimize and build intuition about what will work. This goes back to my earlier comment about federated learning research and on-device versus cross-silo, is that a lot of what researchers are looking to optimize is stuff we know is important in cross-device. We don't know if it's important in cross-silo. We don't have enough experience. We don't have enough runs. Oh, back. But the problem is we can't yet. Because what happens is we come up with an idea and we want to deploy it, and all of these different policy concerns, I'm talking legal policy concerns, InfoSec, business strategy, political, these crop up, clash, and are hard to actually resolve. And there may be a solution, but sometimes it's so complicated people don't even really have the will to try, and it gets shut down. So once you raise the stakes above a bunch of friends who've known each other for years and worked on brain tumor segmentation for a decade plus, who trust one another, and you go to something like pharma, a lot of these policy problems crop up, and the answer is simply, we don't know what to make of this, stop. And it breaks. And this means that I don't know what to ask researchers to help on directly in terms of optimization. But I think there's some work you could do to help us fix, I'm not using this right, there we go. Fix that break right there. And so what I'm hoping is I can lay out some of the land here, and you can have some ideas about how you might help me address this. It is a governance and policy problem, but it needs inputs from algorithms that would do analysis for prediction of how models might perform, for example. And I'll give you one thought I have as well. All right. So, all right, this is kind of fun. I took my presentation and I ran it through ChatGPT just to sort of say, what do you think of this? And you can tell these are Gemini graphics, right? It's all that same kind of stuff. I was having fun. And ChatGPT, and by the way, I use Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude all playing with this presentation. And ChatGPT fired off this question to me. Okay, well, if you could run them, what would you want to learn first? And I thought that was a cool question, so I figured I'd throw it in here. I'd like to know what customers want to do. I've had the chance to talk to a lot of customers until we did have in beta a secure federated learning service before all security services got shut down in our unfortunate prior year. But by far, clearly not enough customers. We need a lot more conversations to understand the space better. I'd like to know if something ran and it was approved, what approvals exactly were required, because I want to know what kind of policy I need to operationalize and even possibly automate. And I, of course, want to know what the secret assets are, because new use cases often introduce new secrets. So this is a set of questions that looks a lot like something industry should answer, and it kind of is. But this middle one here actually has a set of, I'll introduce one at least, questions associated with it that are, in my opinion, very much academic, fascinating, and hard. So let me build a case for that. I say I don't really know what their approvals required. I have some idea. I've seen some processes, and I've definitely worked with a lot of folks, but a lot of their processes aren't yet suited to fit, suited to answer the questions here anyway. So they're moving targets, but we do know what they want, and we know what these policies are going to be centered around. We know that sellers want passive recurring revenue from renting data access. The ideal world here is I plug a box in, connect my data set, and have these wonderful automated policy and governance infrastructure that can be configured so that I don't have to ever touch it, and it prints me money, and I never lose access, I never lose my data. And the buyers want to know they can get meaningful product improvement by renting the access to this data as opposed to having to outright purchase it. And we also know what they fear. Obviously, sellers fear that their data will be exfiltrated. The buyers fear their IP will be stolen. This is like, immediately 2017 kind of, cries that came out from the cross-silo world was like, why aren't the papers talking about this? Well, yeah, it's not nearly as fun. I can understand why students don't want to talk about this. It's hard to quantify even. And in both cases, they don't want to get ripped off. There's a huge fear, it's been there from the start, that I'm going to sell access to my data, you're going to train a model on it, and then you're going to find that model actually learned some other stuff. And I thought I gave you $1 million of value, but I actually gave you $1 billion, and I should have charged you far more. Likewise, the buyers are afraid that they're going to pay access for something and not going to learn anything, and not going to get what their money's worth. But this problem of the buyer will learn more than they paid for, maybe worth a little tangent. This is how drugs work out all the time. Most every drug starts as prostate cancer or breast cancer, and then it's, oh, well, look, hair loss, right? So they have this sense of you run an experiment and you learn way more than you actually anticipated. Okay, so what's the killer research question kind of behind these that I can infer from the policies that are coming that I think might be interesting to this audience? The question is, what will the workload actually learn? And this has so much value in the entire governance and policy discussion around cross-silo federated learning. It's just kind of the magic bullet. And one of the key pieces that I think a lot of folks haven't understood, in fact, I would say the US government doesn't understand, is that this is how this will all be set price-wise. People are not paying per record for this stuff. This is value-based pricing. You pay per record for data you're going to own. When you're renting data, you're trying to actually accomplish some goal. Federated learning, you know the model, you know the task you're trying to train. If we know what the workload will actually learn, if we can predict what it's actually going to be able to do when we're done, we have a tool that we can actually evaluate. We can say, this is the value of this kind of treatment. It's a drug that treats this sort of thing, or it shortens the process by X months, as opposed to just, here's some data, how much money per patient. That's nebulous and kind of difficult to reason about in a federated sense. So when we talk about, I don't know how many people were following ARPA-H's call for a data exchange. They wanted federated learning support, but they were envisioning transactional models on a per patient basis, and it was really obvious talking to customers that what they want to know is, what am I going to learn? What tool am I going to build? And similarly, the seller wants to know, what are you going to learn? Are you going to develop a breast cancer drug off of this? Because if so, I'm going to ask you for $500 million. So, okay, I think I've driven that point to death here. Additionally, this is often the question you're going to hear from a lawyer. It's what you're going to hear from InfoSec, business strategy, security. That's maybe a little bit stretch. It's tangentially connected, but they're going to want to know, what are we actually talking about? What is the value of this? What's it for? And the legal people want to know, kind of, do the risk assessment. And the business strategy people may decide that, no, I don't want to sell this because it potentially has more value if we keep it. So it comes down to, they often want to know, can we constrain it? Or if we can't constrain it, can we audit it? Dan, you did something beautiful. Been waiting to see this. DP inside a TEE, and you don't release it unless it meets your policy, right? You just blow it up if it doesn't, right? So here we go. We train the thing, but we don't actually release it. We audit it first, and actually what we do is we audit it, we send out the report, and then they argue about how much they should pay to actually open the box up, right? So awesome if we can constrain it, but this is also awesome. If we can figure this out, it's amazing. Tiny tangent into what you were talking about on DP. What are we doing time-wise? 5 minutes, yeah, no problem.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please do.
What do you want to audit for here? Because it seems like the thing that you want to audit for is not determined a priori, right? You're like, one of the things you mentioned you're afraid of is some IP is leaked as a byproduct of a learning process. But we don't know what that IP may even look like.
Right, that's a very good
I'm
point.
assuming if you want to do a worst case type audit, then you're just not going to learn anything.
Right, so it's like, I agree that it's sort of like, I can't say that I didn't learn anything I wasn't supposed to, but is there some mechanism by which you can figure out that this model encoded representations that are valuable to another task you do know about, right? I've got another kind of tool, another kind of model, and I want to know, do the representations learned here, could they be used to improve that model? Now, could they be used to improve some model I've never thought of? Yeah, that's incredibly difficult. I don't know, I can't even fathom that.
Yeah.
But maybe it's sort of an unlearning problem. I don't know, for the other case that I'm saying, right? It's a very good point. I think the value here is enough that customers will, swallow the pill and try it anyway, if we can at least do the one where they say, is this going to unlock breast cancer? I mean, I keep saying this, but breast cancer and prostate cancer are, the holy grails, and they want to make sure they're not accidentally selling valuable information about those diseases.
So what you don't want your competitor to learn is relatively well defined, and therefore you could audit for those types of.
So in this pharma case I'm bringing up and using as sort of my example here, yeah, I think there are in some cases, though the minute you start, maybe there are new types of model architectures that use completely different representations and features, I don't know. But at least to some degree, yeah, there is some understanding of what we don't want them to learn.
It's almost like you want to do white box auditing, right? Like you don't want to just auditing the output seems doable if you know what you're looking for, but your concern is that intermediate layers, who knows?
The representation, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also it seems like DP is definitely not the right tool for this problem.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because unfortunately the bug got in some years ago, and it's a common belief that we get brought is that, or we got brought when I was at Intel, is that the differential privacy addresses personal information confidentiality. Well, can't we use it for intellectual property confidentiality? Well, what's the sensitivity of an unknown piece of intellectual property in this data set? That's insane, right? So yeah, it's not a DP problem, but on the other hand, randomized algorithms might help, I don't know. Boy, I've got a couple of things to race through here. These slides are busy. They're meant for a much different talk, but I wanted to throw them up there quickly because I wanted to speak a bit more concretely about this notion of governance and policy. Right now, a lot of this happens at human scale in the medical world. And it's slow and expensive. It works for the research that's been happening, but it's not fast enough for the kind of iteration we need to do in cross-silo FL. And what we really need to be moving toward is more and more technology-assisted governance. And I bolded this section here, codify and enforce policy and workflow where possible. So I'm asking for algorithms that can do these interesting analyses of what was learned. What would I do with those? I'd put them inside smart contracts. I'd put them inside policies as code and then plug them into a system that's able to run a lot of this on behalf of all the parties and spit out whether policies were met and enforced and approved. So what you end up getting oh, sorry, I'll skip that. What you end up getting then is we fix this broken link because we've got this policy platform using these awesome algorithms that hopefully y'all can create that then essentially are able to automatically or with very little human intervention complete this approvals process and allow us to iterate. And the cool thing is if we get here, then all the really cool stuff that I think students really, really will dig into suddenly comes online because we can finally run experiments and know what we're talking about, as opposed to just kind of like, oh, hopefully it works for banks too, right? It's a stretch, frankly. Okay, last little bit, I need to shout out ML Commons. They're a nonprofit, sort of de facto standards for machine learning organization that I'm part of as a volunteer. This is where we did some of the work around governance and organization that we used in the FETS initiative to do some of our subsequent experiments. And right now we have a working group on trying to hash out how we might build a system to do some of this, to automate at least some of or capture and codify some of this policy. And Peter's been coming to that. And I want to put this up there in case, I posited that this probably wouldn't be your key interest. And so I focused on some of the component algorithms that would feed into this. But in case you are actually interested in building systems that do this kind of work, look at this paper. Look at this paper here and reach out to this guy, Alex at ML Commons. I should have put his email on here. All right, so any questions?
Questions? All right, let's thank Micah. And Micah's going to be on the panel as well, so we'll continue the conversation then.
All right. Who's this dude?
All right, I'm going to set up.